Hey there, it's Amy. Long time no see. It's been a hot minute and a half since I've done a video. Just been going through some stuff lately, and I feel like it's a good time to make a video. I just wanted to talk a little bit about uh, creativity and the importance of creativity and how God gave us a sense of creativity to work with, to express Him, to express ourselves, to be a gift to the world. But I will speak for myself in saying that a lot of times my own creativity gets really stunted and suffocated out due to the logical parts of my brain. My logical parts tend to take over and um, kind of squeeze out the creativity that God has given me deep inside. And I was looking at a flyer that a coworker of mine created, workshop that he is doing in regards to facilitating play and creativity and things like that for adults. And I asked the Lord. I said, Lord, what happened to my creativity? What? Why? Why am I so blocked in getting in touch with it? And what came up in my heart was some really interesting things. And I wrote them down. Hopefully, I'll be able to cover a lot of them in a little bit of time. Um, but a couple of the things that came up for me in terms of my own creativity is, as I felt like what came up in me was that creativity requires a childlikeness, of vulnerability, and it also requires getting in touch with uncomfortable emotions sometimes, sadness, grief, pain. And I felt like what came up in my heart was the reason I don't get in touch with my creativity the way that I could is because getting in touch with creativity requires getting in touch with pain, getting in touch with painful parts of yourself, also getting in touch with joyful parts of yourself. But wherever there's joy, there's pain. It's accessing the same parts of you that have various kinds of emotions. And with my, obsessive compulsive, perfectionistic parts, those parts fear that. They fear vulnerability. They fear getting in touch with that childlikeness. And getting in touch with creativity requires getting in touch with your childlike parts, getting in touch with your vulnerable parts, getting in touch with various emotions that might be scary. And I thought that was really interesting. So I just kind of kept pondering that. And when uh, we become vulnerable, when we become um, more in touch with our creative parts, that requires risk. That requires risk to get in touch with. Um, and risk requires an opening of the heart. And an opening of the heart can feel scary to the ego. The ego is like the traffic cop that directs everything. An ego isn't bad. I like to say having an ego is not evil. It's not bad. We need a sense of ego, if you want to use that word. You don't have to use that word necessarily, but ego is kind of like our traffic director, trying to keep things, organized and solid and grounded. But a lot of times that ego, due to past pain or past hurts or just our fallen sinful nature, in a general sense, in terms of humanity, the ego takes over and the ego wants to control. And I think a lot of times it can get in the way. Those parts of me that want to control, that want things to be predictable, the mechanical parts of me, if you will, want to take over and again kind of squeeze out that creativity, that creative part of me. And again, that requires risk and vulnerability to get in touch with those parts. So I'm looking over because I've got my notes here. So sorry if I'm being awkward, but um, one thing I wanted to say is that there's a difference between I should do a video on this in and of itself, but again, creativity requires getting in touch with those more childlike parts. And a lot of times our childlike parts are carrying pain from the past that those childlike parts felt too vulnerable to deal with at the time. So we just kind of keep them buried. And therefore, that can keep creative parts of us buried. I know it has for me. So that was a good connection for me to make when I asked God to show me, what was happening within me in terms of getting in touch with my creativity. And one thing I wanted to just share about that is there's a difference between being childlike and childish. I know that that can be semantics as well, but this is just kind of how my brain works in terms of words and being able to categorize things. But there's a difference between being childish and childlike. I personally, again, semantics, but I look at being childlike as a good quality, a vulnerable quality, but also something that can feel scary, especially if that childlike part is carrying pain from the past or beliefs from the past that it's held on to, and the adult self is kind of trying to stuff down, or the ego, if you will. And so the childlike parts of us are the parts of us that do hold emotion and creativity and imagination and connection and the willingness to take risks and to not worry about the future, but just kind of take steps courageously forward. And I look at the word childish as being more that stunted growth, immaturity, more of an immature kind of way of handling relationships and handling ourselves and things like that. So I look at childlike as being a positive quality and childish as being more stunted. Like Paul says, when I was a child, I walked like a child, talked like a child, I reasoned like a child. But when I became an adult, I put childish ways behind me. So putting those childish ways behind me is God growing us up in love, growing us up into maturity, growing us up into the fullness of Christ, growing us up into love, and Him healing us from those childish, more stunted parts of us. But being childlike, Jesus also said, those who want to enter the kingdom must enter like a child. And I think that's more what he meant by that, was in terms of being childlike, having an innocent heart. Jesus says, be wise as serpents, but innocent as doves. So having a childlike heart. And circling back to creativity, I think that's what that takes, is having that childlike heart. A lot of times we get into our adult worlds, we get busy. Some may have kids and a spouse and a mortgage and all the adult, if you will, things, and it's easy to kind of strangle out the childlike parts of us. But I think God invites us to get in touch with those parts, not so that they can take over. Um, Again, we need a sense of we need a sense of logic and emotion. I think that creative side to us is more so connected to the emotional sides of us. And we need that. So we need to have a good balance. And I think we're always growing into that, having a good balance of logic, groundedness, and emotion and creativity in those childlike parts of us, walking alongside the adult, grounded, wise parts of us. So that's one way to kind of think of that, be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Use your wisdom, use your logic, but also be innocent as a child, getting in touch with those more creative parts of you, based parts of you, and things of that nature that can get sort of stifled as we become adults. And I think that's a journey. That's a journey of healing and walking with God and things of that nature. So just wanted to share my thoughts with you on that. And I hope this was coherent because it's a little bit off the cuff. But love to hear from you guys, and take care. Sorry, it's been so long since I've done a video. But God bless you, and I hope to hear from you soon. Bye-bye.